So thank you for tuning in to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. I hope that you will pick up this package and start learning to be free. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, where information never sleeps and freedom is one seed that needs to be planted.
What we do in life, it goes in eternity.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Hi, and welcome. You're live here with me, Paul Stevenson, on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com on this Friday, the 28th of July, 2017. And waiting in the wings, I have the charismatic and very, very popular public speaker and author of several books, including the Dionysus Rising, if I'm pronouncing that correct, and Living Machines, Monsters from the Id, The Slaughter of Cities, and is Notre Dame Catholic, and he's also written The Jewish Revolutionary Spirit. And he's a very, very popular guy. He's very much loved, by the way, from the feelings I get from him from my 2,000 plus Facebook friends. Very, very popular. He is Michael Jones, Mike Jones, as he's known. He's been on my show before. And I want to speak to him today about basically the libido dominandi, which is the sexual liberation as a form of sexual control. I want to focus on that. And then I've got some questions for him, which some of my Facebook people have asked, could you ask Mike this? So I'm going to put some questions later to him in the last, say, 20 minutes and let him choose. Are you with me, Mike?
Yes, I am. Good to be here.
Yeah, how are you, sir?
I'm doing fine. Doing fine.
Very good. Have you? What have you been up to recently? Have you been on speaking tours? Have you been?
No, I'm staying at home now. I spent the last year. I just traveled way too much the last year, so I'm staying at home.
You've been stretching yourself too far.
I think my body rebelled, so I'm going to take it easy. Stay at home. Stay in South Bend. It's a beautiful summer day in South Bend, Indiana.
Well, as I said, Mike, you know, you're a very, very popular guy. The feelings and the comments that I get from you on Facebook are that you're a very much a man in demand and very much loved. And I know that you've suffered persecution for your beliefs, but you know, it's kind of paid off considering your popularity now. You know.
Well, that's nice to hear. That's nice to hear.
All right. All right. Okay. As I said to you in the email, let's focus the show. I mean, we've done previous shows around the time when Trump was, about to be elected, and the whole lead up to the all that, and then he was elected. But let's sort of stand back, and you know, I've heard you quote. I think it's from your book Libido Dominandi. Am I pronouncing that properly?
Libido Dominandi, yes.
Yeah, about sexual liberation as a form of sexual liberation as a form of political control. And I want to let's talk about the Frankfurt School with a focus, and on Jewish, the Jewish Revolutionary Spirit. Obviously, that's another wonderful book you've written, and the Jewish influence in academia with a focus on Freud and this whole business of sexual liberation as a form of political control. I know that's a wide sort of question, but just break all that down for those for our listeners who are not familiar with all that stuff.
Yeah, the key figure, if you're going to talk about Germany in the 1930s, was Wilhelm Reich, the man who wrote The Mass Psychology of Fascism. He's a crucial figure because he really broke it down in terms of how you could use the media to control people, the new emerging media at his time. He was a Jew in Austria and Vienna at the time, when the Jews were at war with the Catholic Church. They've always been at war with the Catholic Church, but it was specifically a battle back then in the 30s. He was a communist and he was a Freudian. He studied under Sigmund Freud, and he was trying to recruit people. It's very simple. It was a war going on. He's trying to recruit people to his side. He found that when he talked about the fourth thesis of the Third International, everybody's eyes would glaze over and they'd all kind of head for the exits. But he found that whenever he talked about sex, he always had a big audience. So he began to realize that sex is a great recruiting device for revolutionary activity. He was the father of sexual revolution. He's the guy who coined the term. He wrote a book called Sexual Revolution. And basically what he said was, you need to create mass situations. Now you've got a situation, unlike any time before in history, where you can get a lot of people involved in these activities. Pornography has always been a function of technology. At the time of the French Revolution, the Marquis de Sade proposed using pornography as a vehicle for sexual revolution, but he was limited technologically, basically to etchings in Justine. That was state-of-the-art pornography then. He also said exhibit women naked in the theaters. Well, that's okay, but if it's a big theater, you can hardly see the women if you're in the back row, and if it's a small theater, you're not moving very many people. So now with the new technology, in particular motion pictures, you can create a mass situation, and that's precisely what the Jews were doing in Hollywood in the 1930s. And at this point, it set up a cultural battle. One of the defining moments in American history was the Catholics stepped up to the plate, and they basically got the Jews at a weak moment. The Jews had gone into debt to finance talking pictures. Then the economy collapsed, and now the Catholic Church says, we're going to impose a boycott on Warner Brothers theaters. Cardinal Doherty imposed it in Philadelphia, and once the boycott got going, Harry Warner was losing $100,000 a week. That's 1930s money. That's a lot of money in Philadelphia alone, and that boycott was threatening to spread to the rest of the country. All the big cities were predominantly Catholic. So the Jews capitulated. They instituted the production code, and there was no blasphemy, no nudity, no obscenity in movies for 31 years until the Jews broke the code with a Holocaust movie called The Pawnbroker. The Holocaust is this sacred thing to the Jews. They exploited it mercilessly to just get tits on the screen. It was basically a way of smuggling bare breasts on the screen. The Catholics didn't know how to react. They ran up the white flag, and they've lost every single battle in the culture wars ever since. That means right now, the state-of-the-art sexual liberation is the promotion of homosexuality. We just had a year ago the Supreme Court mandated that we have to accept homosexual marriage. That was the Obergefell decision. I just did a book about the Cincinnati Ballet. It's called How Meyer Lansky Took Over the Cincinnati Ballet. It's about an uprising in the art world against this kind of mandatory homosexuality. What do I mean by mandatory homosexuality? What I'm saying now is, I'm talking specifically to the millennial generation because they are the real target. They're the victims here. Basically, you go to get a job at the Cincinnati Ballet, you're expected to act like a homosexual, even if you're not a homosexual. What does that mean? That means basically your relationships are going to be transient, sterile. They're easy to manage when the management wants to pay you low wages. And so basically you hook up with some chick in the ballet or something like that until your contract doesn't get renewed, and then it's goodbye, honey. I'm leaving. My contract wasn't renewed. This is a terrible situation. The millennial generation is really being exploited this way, and to give them their due, they deserve it because they are really going hook, line, and sinker for this homosexual ideology. They're like lambs being led to the slaughter because homosexual ideology, acting like a homosexual, even if you're not one, means get ready for low wages. That's what the whole thing is about. That's state of the art sexual liberation as political control right now.
Yeah, well, the millennials are certainly, I mean, they are born, I mean, we all know the frog in the kettle analogy. They are born at like 95 degrees and they don't seem to have any point of reference. But, what chance do they have? It's aimed right at their forehead. The social engineering, it's so aggressive through the political constructs, through the media, through Hollywood, through box sets, all that stuff, particularly,
Yeah, well, I mean, I was involved in a public protest here in South Bend, Indiana, when our mayor announced that he was a homosexual. And I got unliked on Facebook. All of these young ladies I had never heard of, or actually there were two of them who lived on the same block as I did. I hadn't seen them in about 10 years, and now they're unliking me or unfriending me on Facebook. I mean, talk about hurting a guy's feelings, but I mean, what is Facebook? Well, you get liked if you put a little rainbow banner on whatever it is, your page. Well, isn't this a form of control? Isn't this a form of social engineering? Getting you to lead you into a position where you're basically cutting your own economic throat, at least your economic throat, your future. And that's what happened at the ballet. Okay, the ballerinas are all dancing. I don't know whether you're familiar with modern dance, but it's all basically the same thing. It's called the sex robot dance. Okay. It's Martha Graham and Merce Cunningham combined. I've seen it a million times. The important thing, though, is I think that the dancers are getting tired of doing the sex robot dance. Because what does it mean? What is the meaning of this? It means all relationships are doomed to failure. And if you're a young person, your relationship is doomed to failure. So you may as well reconcile yourself to transient, sterile relationships and get used to low wages, because that's the new reality. Well, the ballerinas didn't like this. 4 ballerinas got pregnant at the Cincinnati Ballet. Now, this is unprecedented in the entire history of dance. I don't think this ever happened in any dance company, in any country in the world. And I'm saying that this is an inchoate protest on the part of the millennial generation against being forced into this kind of homosexual behavior box. I mean, I was at Occupy Wall Street. It was the same thing there in a slightly different mode. All these millennials sitting there, they're holding little signs saying, I'm $50,000 in debt and all I can get is an unpaid internship. We're talking about manifestation of the same type of sexual social engineering that is being imposed on these people, and they don't even understand what's going on. Their acceptance of the homosexual lifestyle, and I'm not talking about whether they're homosexuals or not. I'm talking about their acceptance of the fact that relationships are always transient and always sterile is leading them into deeper and deeper forms of control and demoralization.
Yeah, and it totally undermines the whole sort of structure and foundation of the Christian Western culture and civilization. Of course, I mean, as you say, woe to you if you don't not only accept and not only embrace, but you have to celebrate homosexuality.
That's right. And if you don't do that, you're a bad person. You're a
bad. The left. And the far left establishment, their argument, if you could be so gracious to call it an argument, which they don't have, it's so emotional, with moral high ground grabbing and their drug of choice of righteous indignation, which they constantly indulge in. You're not misguided, you're not wrong. There's no debate. You're just evil.
Yes, and error has no rights.
Sorry?
And so therefore, you're automatically disqualified for saying anything in your behalf. We're going to unfriend you on Facebook. So take that.
Yeah. I get the impression, Mike, like myself, you probably don't lose that much sleep over people unfriending on Facebook.
No, actually, I didn't lose a whole lot of sleep. But deep down, I'm a sensitive guy, and all of these young ladies unfriending me. I mean, what's going on here? I'm trying to help you out. And I think, but the positive side is, I think there's an awareness that is growing throughout the world that we're being manipulated, and we didn't know this before, and now we're starting to understand how we're being manipulated. And once you understand how it works, well, it doesn't work that well. Maybe it doesn't work at all.
I mean, you go to a movie these days, and the political correctness and the social engineering is so aggressive and it's so contrived in the movies. I'm thinking, do people, do they really expect us to be, that gullible where we can't see this? And I'm thinking, maybe there are some people who can't see this. And I'm thinking, spare me the PC stuff about, 19th century period dramas, where there's loads of black people who were never in England back then, and feminism wasn't an issue back then. They rewrite history all the time, and I'm thinking, it just stop it, okay? It's not, it's not that it insults me directly or offends me. It's just boring. I want to see a good movie.
Yes. Let's talk about race, because I think that's part of the whole equation here. As I said, I wrote this book 25 years ago. I was thinking through this 25 years ago. If the thesis is true, it should apply now. It should apply across the board. So I'm talking to a guy in California, a millennial. Okay, he thinks he's white. Okay, and I think he is white, to be perfectly honest with you, because he's from Alabama. And I think that if you grew up in Alabama, white had a meaning. You were white or you were black. Okay. But he's saying that there's this war against white males. And I'm thinking, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? So then, we have this conversation, and I'm saying, I don't think that's the issue. I think there's another issue involved here. Anyway, I go to the gym, and this is the only time I ever see television, because I don't have a television. So I'm there lifting weights, and this commercial comes on. Okay, the commercial is young white lady, young white guy. Okay, they're supposed to be attracted to each other. Next frame is they're on a yacht in Miami Bay or Biscayne Bay or something like that. And the young lady is sitting on the lap of this black guy who looks like a pimp or a rapper or something like that. Okay, next frame is the white guy. He's sitting on the lap of some guy that looks like a biker. And he's got this really kind of a funny look on his face. Well, this is exactly what this guy was talking about. Okay, there is this kind of attack on these people. That's the negative sense of it. There's a positive sense, I think, or a positive attack is all these neo-pagan TV shows or series like Game of Thrones. They're all based on kind of Tolkien, but they all valorize this kind of mythic past.
Yeah.
I'm saying I'm starting to see similarities here between now, like the polarization that's going on in Europe right now. You got Muslims on the one hand who are being radicalized by these Wahhabi madrasas, a really toxic form of Islam that leads to terrorism. Everybody knows that. Okay. And on the other side, you have the natural reaction to this, which is turning out to be white guy nationalism. And all these white guys now who think they're Vikings and they're going to defend Europe against this invasion. This is similar to what happened in the United States during the 1960s. The book I wrote about this is called The Slaughter of Cities. The subtitle is Urban Renewal as Ethnic Cleansing. And basically what you had was, it was called the Civil Rights Movement in the early 60s. That was down south. It was basically the Black Jewish Alliance trying to disrupt and overturn Southern culture, which was fantastically successful. It was so successful, as a matter of fact, that the people, the movers and shakers, mainly the Jews who were the money people behind the civil rights movement, decided to move it up north and attack a different group of people, namely the Catholic ethnics. These people were not white guys, okay? They were Polish. They were Irish.
Aren't Polish and Irish people white?
They're not white, no.
I'm Irish, Mike. I consider myself white.
Yeah, I'm Irish. I happen to be biracial.
What am I then?
I'm Irish and German, and I guarantee you that when you wake up in Germany and you look in the mirror, or you wake up in Estonia or Lithuania, and you look in the mirror, you don't see a white guy. You see a Lithuanian. There's an ethnic identity here, and this immediately became apparent to. This is Martin Luther King we're talking about now. Bring him up to Chicago, and we're going to bust up the neighborhoods in Chicago. Well, what's the continuity here? They had something called segregation in the South, okay? Laws that restricted black people. They didn't have any laws like this in Chicago. Even the black people in Chicago didn't understand what Martin Luther King was doing. The ministers took out an ad. The black ministers in Chicago took out an ad and told Martin Luther King to go back home because this wasn't the way Chicago was run. Chicago was, and like every city in the North was a basic enclaves of ethnic neighborhoods, German neighborhoods, Irish neighborhoods, Corktown in Detroit, Poletown in Detroit. All of these were basically European enclaves there. And the big mystification and transformation that was supposed to take place when Martin Luther King arrives in Chicago is now you're supposed to identify yourself as white. Well, we weren't white. We were Irish.
Yeah, if Irish people aren't white, what are they then?
When you're talking, I'm talking about an identity. When you say white, what you're saying is it's a lack of identity. What I'm saying is that you've lost contact with your roots. And your roots have identity means you speak a language, you have a religion, you have customs that go with this. And in this instance, I'm talking about all of these customs and identity that grew up in countries in Europe. And these people got shipped over to the United States where they came in contact with a large black population that had been weaponized largely by the WASP Jewish alliance. To basically become an agent of social engineering,
and they're being weaponized even more today than ever.
No, I don't think that. I don't think that's the case. I think what we're talking about here is what we call blowback. Okay, it's the same thing that happened to the Mujahideen in Afghanistan. Okay, basically you weaponize the black population. I'm talking about during the 1960s. In Chicago, even the government was giving money to the Black Stone Rangers to engage in criminal activity because they were supposed to basically drive the Catholics out of their ethnic neighborhoods. That was their job. Well, you do this, okay, it's like giving Osama bin Laden Stinger missiles. Okay, the Russians go home, the Soviet Union collapses, but those guys still have the Stinger missiles and they're still acting on what they learned. That's what happened to the black population on the south side of Chicago. It's like Frankenstein. I don't know whether you heard the statistics, but this 4th of July on the south side of Chicago broke a record in terms of murders. Okay, this is Frankenstein. You wreck the black culture. You wreck the black family. You have kids growing up in 80 to 90% illegitimate. You've got a situation where you got a monster that's out of control and it starts killing itself. I don't remember exactly. I think it was 40 murders over a 12-hour period. This is incredible. I mean, especially in context of like Black Lives Matter. Wait a minute. Black Lives Matter. Why aren't you talking about the south side of Chicago? So it's out of control. It's a Frankenstein monster that's blowback from the weaponization of basically what we had was the Black Jewish Alliance. I cover this in the Jewish Revolutionary Spirit. Beginning with the beginning of the NAACP, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. That's a Jewish operation.
Of course it is.
Marcus Garvey went to the NAACP headquarters in the 1920s and he said there were no black people. It was all Jewish lawyers run by the Spingarn brothers. What the Jews were trying to do here was create a revolutionary avant-garde. That's what they did. They used the black people as the as the avant-garde of their revolution, and the culmination of it was the civil rights movement, which was a successful revolutionary movement in the United States. Completely destroyed, or let's say uprooted one Southern tradition after the other. It's not over now. We still have people campaigning to tear down statues of Robert E. Lee and people like that in the South. It's not over. And it's not over, particularly on the south side of Chicago, because when you wreck the people's culture, it becomes dangerous, it becomes toxic, and they're killing each other. So yes, it was the consequence of the Black-Jewish alliance. I'm just saying that we need to take a lesson from this and go back to, well, let's say Marquette Park, when Martin Luther King shows up in Marquette Park. They start throwing rocks at him. He gets hit on the head with a rock and he has to leave. Okay, this scandalized the Catholics. Then we had the civil rights.
Mike, we're going to break, so we'll be back in about 4 minutes. Hi, you're back here live with me, Paul Stevenson, on Revolution Radio on this Friday, the 28th of July, 2017. And I'm delighted to say that I've got Mike Jones with me. And we've been discussing, the Black Lives Matter and sexual liberation and all those sorts of things in the 20th century as a form of political control. Are you back with me, Mike?
Yes, I'm back.
All right. Listen, we've got an hour and a half of it's gone. As I said to you, you're a very popular guy on Facebook. When I post anything about you, there's a lot of kind of positivity about you. And I asked some people just to share it out if they've got some questions for you when we do the show. So I said I've got some questions here, and just to be consistent with that. I've got some questions, and I said I would ask you and let you pick one. I've got one here from Kristen Goldberg. She said, I'd love to hear his thoughts on the Holocaust. Its official story, revisionist uncoverings, Israel's formation and its industry. Basically, do you believe the official evidence of it, such as the 6 million gas chambers? There's another one here. It says, what is the end game for Syria and Gaza? Is Israel collaborating with ISIS? Another one said he would like your thoughts on Vatican II Council and the new Mass and why he harbors such hostility towards the Society of St. Pius.
Let's stop. Second question, Syria. Trump just pulled the plug on the so-called moderate rebels in Syria. He had made an agreement with Russia, no more support for the moderate rebels in Syria, and so the regime is going to stay in power. The attempt to topple it has failed. Second one, Vatican II. Vatican II is a legitimate expression of the magisterium of the Catholic Church. Okay, the documents are part of the magisterium. I have no quarrel with any document in Vatican II. What I have a quarrel with is all of the experiments that came into being after Vatican II. The most notorious and most debilitating of all of these was Catholic-Jewish dialogue, okay, which is basically has crippled the entire Catholic Church in its ability to deal with subversive activity on the part of the Jews. I've already mentioned the Legion of Decency, the 1930s, when the Catholic Church basically stopped the Jewish subversion in Hollywood. That ended at the time of the ending of the Second Vatican Council. This has been a disaster for the Catholic Church. It's been a disaster for the world. And we need to just say, retire it to the dustbin of failed experiments and move on. Back to the traditional Catholic position, which is Sicut Judaeus Non, which I describe in my book, The Jewish Revolutionary Spirit, which is basically no one has a right to harm the Jew or disrupt his religious services or deface his monuments and his cemeteries. Okay. On the other hand, the Jew has no right to undermine the morals of Christian believers or ridicule their faith and work for the subversion of Christian countries.
Yeah, but the Jews can't help themselves, can they? I mean, they're a wrecking ball, and
they that in many ways, you're right. They can't help themselves, but that's why they need the help of the Catholic Church to keep these subversive tendencies under control. As I said, it worked for 31 years in the United States. It worked for 1,500 years in the West, and I think it's worth trying again.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting, do you know what, I'm from Ireland, Mike, as you probably know from my accent, and it grieves me tremendously to, apart from some older, wiser heads in the Catholic Church that I know back home, it grieves me just how much the Catholic Church has just capitulated and collapsed and just, Ireland embraces gay marriage now. Listen, honestly, it breaks my heart what's going on over there,
I feel your pain. I'm half Irish, so I feel half as much pain as you do. But in a sense, I mean, Germany is the same type of situation.
Yeah.
You have the Catholic Church has internalized the commands of its oppressors. We have to stop doing this. We have to wake up. This is ridiculous.
Well, let's look at that, because I know your own background. Just talk about your own background with the Catholic Church as a younger man, and the infiltration of the Catholic Church.
I went to a Jesuit college where I got all of the bad training that our current Pope got. Bad philosophy. The Jesuits were trying to promote Teilhard de Chardin and kind of a theistic evolution, and I lost the faith. I stopped practicing as a Catholic. I came back to the faith after I got married, and after I got married in 1969, we went to Germany in 1973, and it was, in a sense, God's plan to bring us back to the Catholic Church, because I had to get out of Philadelphia. It was too much. I couldn't separate the forest from the trees. When I came to Germany, I realized that there was a universal church. It was here. My wife was an Episcopalian. She couldn't find the Episcopalian church in the village we lived in Germany, and she converted as well. And I haven't looked back. I put my hand on the plow, and I haven't looked back. And my engagement with it has intensified. But at the same time, I can't say that I haven't had my disappointments. The biggest disappointment being I was hired to teach American literature at St. Mary's College here in South Bend, Indiana. Got fired, this Catholic college, got fired 1 year later for opposing abortion because the feminists had taken over this college. Now, this is one of these moments in history where it seems like it's bad, but it turns out it's the best thing that ever happened to me, because it allowed me to go on and do what I've done for the past almost 40 years now, which is my own kind of independent research. I was liberated from academia, for which I thank God, because there was nothing will cripple you more intellectually than being a professor at a university these days.
Or being a student under the influence of those brainwashing.
You have to pay for that.
Yeah, I mean, you got to hand it to the Jews. They get you to pay for your own destruction.
That's right. And one of the biggest scandals, as you mentioned, I wrote a book about Notre Dame, about their complete sellout of the faith under Father Hesburgh, who was an agent of the Rockefellers. But one of the biggest scandals is the fact that they are handing these young Catholics over to the usurers. You have to borrow $60,000 a year. This is $250,000 you have to borrow for the most part. I mean, some people have parents that can pay for this out of their own pockets. It's small change for some people. But for the overwhelming majority of Catholics in the United States, this would mean debt bondage for the rest of their lives. This is the crisis that everyone is facing right now. $1 trillion of student loan debt in the United States alone.
Yeah, and as I say, I mean, there are some people, probably a minority, who are wealthy enough to take that hit. But I speak to people in Ireland, because I work for an Irish company, and they're like, they're working 2 jobs so they can send their kids to universities, and I'm going, please don't. You just save yourself that, okay? Because you're going to lose your kids.
Yeah, I mean, I'm no fan of communism or the Soviet Union, but they didn't ask you to pay for your chains over there.
Oh man, it's so depressing. You know what? It's just like, the more you look at it, the more you just it's just a rape operation.
Yes, there was. I don't know if I've mentioned before the Civiltà Cattolica series. that appeared in 1890 on the Jewish question. The conclusion of that was just stunning. Any country that turns away from the laws created by Christian kings will end up being ruled by the Jews. What we're seeing is Europe, in a sense. Every revolution has put more and more power into the hands of the Jews until finally you have a country like Ireland in debt bondage. Why did they agree to that bailout in Ireland? Why didn't they follow Iceland? The answer is because of the weakness of the Catholic Church. It's that simple.
Yeah, don't get me started on that. I went to a conference about 4 years ago. I mean, there are a few people who are up in arms about it, but essentially the Irish just, the fighting Irish stopped fighting.
That's right. That's right. And I think that the reason is because they lost the backing of the church. The church internalized the commands of its oppressors. And in a sense, you can say that the church is not standing up for ethnic identity in Europe, with exceptions. And the main exception, I would say, would be Poland, where I think that we have turned the corner. I turned the corner, at least on sexual liberation and gender ideology. When I was in Argentina, I got an email from a Polish guy. He said, between your book, the Polish translation of Libido Dominandi, and the action of the Polish bishops, you have obliterated gender ideology in Poland. Now that, I think, is the formula for success in Ireland, for example. It could happen in Ireland. There's no reason it can't happen in Ireland. There's no reason it can't happen in Hungary. I'm just trying to say here that I got an email recently from Zoltan, in Budapest, and Zoltan is telling me that he's a white guy. Zoltan, you're not a white guy. You're Hungarian. Hungarians are not white, okay? You don't need to be white. You've already got an identity. You speak a language. Nobody can understand your language. It's like being in a secret society. Nobody understands Hungarian. You can go, I've been to Hungary. I can't read any signs, nothing. You've got like a secret society. You've got 1,000-year tradition of Christianity, of Catholicism. You've got ethnic solidarity. So you don't need being white. That's the formula. And the formula has worked in Poland with regard to gender ideology and sexual liberation.
Yeah, I mean, the polls are impressive, as I say. I mean, I look at Ireland, and it has got so liberal, and it's just basically returned to its pagan roots. I mean, there's conferences about just pagan stuff. It's unbelievable. I mean, the way Ireland's gone in such a short period of time. I mean, they're criticizing Conor McGregor in the Irish Times. Calling him racist for some silly comment he made. Ireland has gone so liberal and so ungodly. It's turned its back completely.
Yes. And I'm saying the more you turn your back on Jesus Christ and God, the weaker you will become. And the weaker you become, the more easier you are to rule. And that's what the Jews like. And that's the teaching of the Catholic Church. Okay, obviously, Civiltà Cattolica is not the magisterium, but it was the official magazine of the Catholic Church, and they said it there in 1890. It's there waiting to be actualized, a much more effective system than any type of opposition I can see on the horizon right now. It worked in Poland, it can work in Hungary, it can work in Ireland.
Yeah, well, as you said, it's that ancient war on Christ and Logos that is continuing, and the Jews have always been the main, opposers to Jesus Christ. And what amazes me and what grieves me is just how much power and how much success they've had in a century.
That was amazed at the editors of Civiltà Cattolica, because the articles came out on the 100th anniversary of the French Revolution. And they said, basically, well, what has happened to France over this 100 years? Well, they ended up being ruled by Jews, Jewish financiers like James Rothschild, the Rothschild family. They took over all of the capitals of Europe. And England is no exception. England is the classic example. I cover this in my book, Barren, which is in many ways the sequel to the Jewish Revolutionary Spirit, about Jewish finance. When Nathan Rothschild bet the Prince of Hesse-Kassel's money on the outcome of the Battle of Waterloo. He made a killing.
Yeah, sure.
On the console, and then what did he do with that money? He lent it to English aristocrats so they could build their big mansions, and they all got in debt, and they all became slaves of the Jews. And this is the classic instance of this is the Churchill family.
Yeah. That's right. I mean, they've got, Churchill was a total scumbag. I mean, he's revered as, don't get me started on Churchill. But
no, he was a total pawn of the Jews, too, because his father died 80,000 pounds in debt to Mattie Rothschild. The Rothschilds forgave the debt, but they got ensnared Winston as their agent, and the rest is history.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk a little bit about. We've gone back a little bit about Napoleon and the emancipating the Jews and the devastating effect that had. I don't think Napoleon really, really could foresee how disastrous that would be.
No, I mean, basically, he needed the support of the Jews in the Pale of the Settlement, which was then Western Russia, because he was setting out to conquer Russia, and so he decided to emancipate the Jews. Okay, he was coming back from, I think it was the Battle of Jena. He ends up in Strasbourg, and they tell him it's a disaster. You should not have emancipated the Jews. They do not behave like citizens. They exploit their fellow citizens, and the main vehicle of exploitation was usury at that time. I was in Strasbourg, and I'm having dinner, and suddenly all these bells start ringing. And I turn to my host and I say, what's going on? And he gets this embarrassed look on his face, and he says, well, the bells are a sign that the Jews have to leave the city. So they're still ringing the bells. There's still some type of sense there among these people that this is a predatory group of people, but there's no one can come up with the formula. I'm saying Europe is right now being set up to fail. It's being set up to fail in the same way that the people, the Catholics in Chicago, were set up to fail. Because on the one hand, you have the radical Wahhabi Islam and terrorism, and on the other hand, you have what is being groomed is going to be a violent white reaction. And that plays right into the hands of the manipulators, the people, the oligarchs, in the same way that it played into the hands of the social engineers in Chicago during the 1960s. You got black people fighting white people, and both of them being manipulated by the oligarchs as a form of ethnic cleansing and ultimately social control.
Yeah, I mean, you hear a lot about how much of it's propaganda. I'm not sure. I would imagine a large part of it about, persecution against Jews now. I mean, they're responsible for flooding Europe, with my research, with Islam, who are tremendously hostile to Jews, and people are becoming aware of how the Jews pull the strings of our culture. And so some of them are saying, "Oh, we're all going back to Israel." I mean, why don't they go back to Israel? They let them all go back to Israel, because when you look at their history, they got to get out of the culture, Mike, because they are a wrecking ball and they can't help themselves. And are we going to see, when it's bad enough, when you're literally on your knees and your kid's future is in just genuine threat? Or can you see it where we're going to say the Jews have to leave like they have done in history? Or is the political control and the political correctness and their domination so absolute that we can't even imagine that?
No, I think they're setting up a conflict where they become invisible. The conflict they're setting up is white nationalists versus Wahhabi Islamic fundamentalist terrorists.
Yeah.
And where do they're not visible. They're invisible in that whole thing. And that's,
they are.
So if you get into this dynamic or this dichotomy, you're not addressing the problem. I'm saying it's exactly analogous to what happened in Chicago during the 1960s. It was blacks versus whites, and Catholics versus people from Mississippi, and neither of them had a clue that there were bigger forces that were orchestrating this thing. And the big forces, well, it was the Black Jewish Alliance. And there was obviously a component of WASP participation. The Quakers were heavily involved in this too, but it was basically the Black Jewish Alliance that was behind the whole thing.
Yeah, it's the same thing. You're right. You hear all the arguments, and they're very good arguments. People like Douglas Murray, who's got a decent, good profile. I've read his book, and but he just, you know what? Douglas Murray goes there. He realizes at some point in his own research that the Jews are behind it all, and then he backs right off. But his arguments are very, very good, and the same arguments could be applied to the Jews. But as you said, they're invisible. They're not in the picture. They're just these. In fact, they come out of it as victims as well, like the rest of us.
Well, I mean, take as I said, what's the state of the art? Sexual liberation is homosexuality. So after the Obergefell decision, Amy Dean, Jewish lady, writes an article in Tikkun saying, if it weren't for Jews, we wouldn't have homosexual marriage. Well, if I say that, they call me an anti-Semite. If she says it, it's okay. It's okay. Well, this is ridiculous. This is a ridiculous double standard where it's bad depending on who says it and the tone of voice and which way your eyebrow moves, I guess, or something like that. Joe Biden said the same thing. 4 years ago, Joe Biden says, praising the Jews, saying, we want to thank you because if it weren't for the Jews, we wouldn't have gay marriage. Well, okay, I'm saying the same thing. Okay, I'm just saying gay marriage is a bad thing. They're saying it's good. I'm saying it's bad, but we're both making the same statement. So how come there's this double standard here? This is intolerable. What we need to do is have a discussion of the issues because they want to suppress the discussion and foment violence. That's what they're doing. That's what's happening in Europe right now. We are setting up a violent clash, which is going to lead to a much quicker demise of what's left of these traditional European cultures than if they didn't have violence. I'm proposing the opposite. I'm proposing let's discuss it, which is what we're doing right now.
Yeah, but they know under scrutiny that the genie will be out of the bottle. So that's why they have to shut down the argument with hate speech and clamping down on free speech, because they know that if we do have a discussion, Mike, they're going to lose, and they're going to lose miserably. So they are working very hard right now on just shutting down conversations like me and you're having right now.
That's right. You're absolutely right. But that's a good sign in a sense because they know they will lose the argument. And the proof that they know they are going to lose the argument is they have to ban certain kinds of speech. It's obvious. You're going to lose. You don't want to debate. You don't want to talk because you know you're going to lose because nobody believes this anymore. Nobody believes that two homosexuals can get married. Nobody believes it, really. Nobody believes that you're transgendered. Nobody believes this. Even Trump, the clock the broken clock that's right twice a day. Even Trump has banned transgender.
Yeah, I laughed when he did. I thought, good, there's some pushback, and of course they're always mobilized and they're ready to march and stuff. But I heard one transgender guy say, "Oh, they don't hate us because we're transgender. They hate us because they're just like us." And I'm thinking, yeah, I wake up every day terrified that my birth certificate and my attraction to women is just one big conspiracy. I mean, these people are full of BS, aren't they? And they believe it.
That's right. And in a sense, to come back to the ballet is an art form where you're really either male or female. It's very pronounced gender roles here. You know what I mean? The females, you can tell it's females, even if you're challenged in that regard, because they're all wearing tutus, okay? And the men are even more sexualized because of the tights they wear. So it's very masculine, feminine, and that's just reality.
Mike, have you got 10 minutes on the other side?
I'd love to, but I got to get off. Things I got to do.
All right. Well, thanks for coming on.
Thank you. Pleasure.
All right. Speak to you soon.